Joined now by the national sports editor of the Daily Hive and its offside sports vertical, the one and only Rob the Hockey Guy, Rob Williams, joins us here. How we doing?
Doing great, guys. It's summertime. We're into trades and off-season transactions and still playing the Stanley Cup final. So somehow, I'm not sure how they didn't get this business done by now, but here we are.
I kind of like it. It's kind of like back to being like a festival of sorts in the National Hockey League. It's a lot.
There's going to be a guy traded before the parade. You realize this is happening
off of the team.
Like someone's going to win the Stanley Cup either Friday or next week, and then someone is going to be traded before the champagne is even dry.
It's a great poll question
from their clothing. It is quite a schedule matrix the NHL has delivered us here this year. We'll get to that in a second, but the big talk here in Vancouver is Jake Guentzel, Rob, and we're asking on our poll question today. Saravelli saying he suspects the offer is going to come in around 7 years at $9.5 million per. What do you think? Should the Canucks do that deal?
I'm conflicted on this one. I kind of think yes. Like I think they need to make a splash here. I think if you add a guy like Jake Guentzel onto your roster, like that gives you another core piece, like gives you another piece of the puzzle to win a Stanley Cup. You have a high degree of familiarity with him, of course, with Tocchet, like, Tocchet knows him, like, so they would have a pretty good sense that he can play in his system. And I think that's the type of guy, a playoff performer, a consistent goal scorer. I think the fact that he went to Carolina and also produced, I think that gives me even more confidence, I think, in signing him. He's not just a Sidney Crosby merchant. He's not just a guy that plays in that one team and succeeded. So I do think that, I'm willing. I don't know if I'm willing to go all the way to 10 million, but I think that this is a time to take a swing. Like you are, like, this is their window, isn't it? Like they've committed the money to these other players. They've got these core pieces in place. Take a crack at it and let's go.
So let me ask you the follow-up, because of course, if you're spending $9.5 million at Jake Guentzel, you're going to have to scrimp and save elsewhere. If it means not being able to re-sign Zadorov, Joshua, some of the existing free agents, if it means having to go into the year with, say, a bunch of minimum salary hope bets on the fourth line or somebody on the third pair that you don't feel great about, is that something you're willing to do to get Guentzel?
Yeah, and that's the rub, right? Like, you're going to have to go cheaper in other areas. You're not going to have the certainty of bringing back guys that you already know fit in your system. But I also do think, like, you're a lot of teams have made mistakes by throwing big money at guys that fit the profile of Zadorov, of Joshua. And I love the way they played down the stretch last season. Joshua, I love the way he played all year. But, like, how much money can you throw at Zadorov? Love the guy, great playoffs. He was sixth in average ice time among Canucks defensemen last season. Like, let's not, like, everyone's ready to toss Ian Cole out immediately. He was fourth, right? Like, let's not get too enamored with what we saw in a 13-game sample. As great as the sample was, like, the guys like Zadorov get overpaid in free agency. So I think if you can get him at a number that you're comfortable with, maybe he gives you a discount because he seems to really love it in Vancouver. Great, but otherwise, no. And again, Joshua, like, you can't give Joshua second line money if he's a third liner. He's never been more than a third liner. Like, last year was the high point of his career. He's in his late 20s. He's not in his early 20s. So, again, love the player, great chemistry with Garland, but there's a limit to what you can spend there. So I do think that those guys might be destined to be gone anyways. But yeah, you're gonna have to, this is where Alvin's really gonna have to earn his earn his money. I mean, if you can bring in Guentzel, like, what do you do in those other areas? I think he's gonna have to figure it out. You have to, and like you say, you're gonna have to scrimp and save in other areas.
You can coach defense though, and he knows this. He has already had success revamping the way that this team plays defense. So he knows that he can work with almost anybody, I think, to a degree, and prevent goals, especially with a Vezina caliber goalie in between the pipes. What we saw last season was this club still struggling to figure out ways to put the puck in the net, which sounds crazy considering where they finished in goals for on the season. But of course, we know how that actually came to pass, and that is feasting in October and November with an inexplicable scoring percentage. You do wonder if they put the onus on offense here in the offseason, because that is the greater difficulty. You can coach defense. You can't coach offense, really.
I agree with everything you said, but at the same time, like, their penalty kill and defense turned around by bringing in a lot of, veteran, defensively responsible players. And
which Guentzel is, by the way, of which Guentzel. Yeah.
No, I think Guentzel is kind of the exception for me. It feels weird kind of saying, like, yeah, I think they should go for him, because, for how many years have we just all been like, just be responsible, don't overcommit, don't pay money to guys in their 30s. But, I think the game has changed a little bit here by what the Canucks showed last season. And if you are genuinely going for a Stanley Cup, maybe you accept that a couple of those years on the back end of the contract are not going to be looking so great, right? Maybe you accept that just to bring in a bona fide star into your lineup. Now that, maybe we're willing to roll the dice on something like that. And I do think, like, okay, do you want to commit big money in term to a guy like Jake Guentzel, or do you want to do it for Nikita Zadorov and Dakota Joshua? Like, imagine if we asked that question 1 year ago, like, do you want to commit all this money to Zadorov and Joshua? Like, you'd be laughed out of the room, right? Like, this is a short sample of success for these guys.
Conversely, I think people would be surprised. I think, given how much of a fan favorite Joshua and Zadorov were, guys, if we had asked fans at the end of the regular season, certainly at the moment the playoffs ended, are you okay walking away from those guys to pick up Jake Guentzel? I don't think the answer would have been what it is today. And that is, I think that the absence, the space of time from the end of the playoffs till now has sobered people up a little bit. They've come down from the highs of Joshua and Zadorov a little bit, and are maybe ready to make a more rational decision on this.
The highs of Joshua, there were 2 really good games out of 13.
Yeah.
The high of Zadorov was different. So since you brought it up, we asked this on our poll question yesterday. You willing to let Zadorov walk if it means signing Guentzel? What do you think the breakdown was?
It was
yes or no?
I'm guessing an overwhelming yes.
Rob, what do you think?
I would say that is pretty split. I'd say it'd be close to 50-50.
Okay. It was 75-25 yes. So,
yeah.
Fans are there. You're right about they've come down on the high of Zadorov. I think they're also obviously bedazzled by the shiny object that is potentially the best winger in free agency, because I think there's a strong chance Reinhart is going to re-sign in Florida. Not to mention a cup winner, not to mention they've been hearing his name since the trade deadline.
Yeah.
Right? As I've argued all week, you're committing bad years there. That's not necessarily the case with Zadorov for some others, because you're probably out of those players before age 35, whereas Guentzel, you're paying till age
38-ish,
37, 38, something like that. He's not an all situations winger. He's a terrific scorer and offensive producer, but he's not a penalty killer. He's not going to be a primary defensive player for you, although he is, strong enough there to play a capable shift. And of course, he robs from your ability to fill out the rest of your roster. Rob, have you looked who's playing in the bottom 6 right now? Like, and it's going to change. They'll add a depth forward here or there, but have you looked at what their bottom 6 stacks up right now in terms of guys under contract?
No, I know it's bleak. Yeah, no, I get all that. I think you can find guys though. You can find players, and the wild card I think in all of this is Ilya Mikheyev, and I don't mean, and that could mean him turning his his Canucks career around. It could also mean getting off his salary, and it doesn't sound like they're going to be able to do it for free. Like it's going to cost them an asset. But if you can get rid of Ilya Mikheyev's contract, like what is that worth to the Canucks to get off that contract? And I do wonder, like, Mikheyev makes $4.75 million. What's Zadorov going to make? Somewhere in the five. Like that's, if you get off Mikheyev, suddenly you can probably afford Zadorov. Yeah. Would you rather Zadorov on your, would you trade Mikheyev and a third round pick for Zadorov? I think the answer is yes. And if you're willing to do that, then that means you're willing to give a third round pick to get rid of Mikheyev. Now, are you willing to do a second round pick?
That's the question, because that's the Puckpedia calculation, Rob. It's a second round pick. Would you move a second round pick to get off the Mikheyev contract? And
the trouble with that is they've just given away so many draft picks. Like they like at some point you need to stop the insanity of ditching all of these draft picks. But at the same time, like, if you said to a Canucks fan last season, even before Zadorov's big glow up in the playoffs, like, would you rather that I take Zadorov off your roster, or would you rather I take Mikheyev and a second round pick off your roster? I think people would say they'd rather keep Zadorov and second round pick be damned. So it's going to be very, very interesting. The big key to this is like their evaluation of Zadorov. Is he closer to what we saw in the playoffs last year? Is he just a Rick Tocchet guy? Can he be a bona fide top four defenseman playing 20 minutes a night? Or was that a bit of a blip? And he's kind of that 4-5 guy on your depth chart that brings size and energy and leadership and all the rest. That's the big decision, and I'm not totally convinced that he's a guy that you should be giving like big money and big term to. I think you get one or the other.
Considering we just did the homework and Philip Hronek is the highest paid defenseman on a lot of teams in the NHL, how many teams do you think you can find that have a defenseman at almost $8 million in Hughes, 7.25 in Hronek, and I mean, whatever Zadorov, and then like 5.5. Like, there's not many teams that have three defensemen totaling that much money at the top. It would be a lot committed, considering one of those guys is not making the All-Star team. Like, Zadorov's not got a chance for an All-Star team.
Exactly. Yeah. I like I say, I'm so conflicted on Zadorov because you think with your heart and you're like, okay, yeah, give it to him, go for it, and you're thinking he's going to be like that guy in the playoffs, but I just don't know that he's going to be that guy consistently. The one thing I do know, guys, is like whoever they pair. I know the talk has been, Hronek, maybe he is on his own pair away from Hughes next season. Whatever they do, I just want them to not put a pending free agent on the Hughes pair, because Hughes is going to get whoever he plays with paid, and it's going to be really hard to re-sign that guy. I think we've seen it time after time where, Luke Schenn got his money. He made Luke Schenn into a point-producing defenseman, and Schenn became unaffordable and went out the door. So that's, if nothing else, I'm hoping they get somebody at least on a 2-year contract to play with Hughes.
To answer your question, Vegas, Colorado, the Rangers. Some of the best teams in the league have that salary structure with three defensemen being paid in those.
But there's not many
in those realms.
There's not many.
Mm-hmm. With regards to Hronek, Rob, we should get your take on what you thought of that deal and what you think about whether he needs to anchor his own pair at some point during the course of that contract.
Yeah, I thought Hronek was a guy you couldn't let Hronek go. Like, get rid of Hronek and then try to replace him. Like, good luck. Like, he was an excellent defenseman for the Canucks last season. I know his point production took a dip in the second half. I know he wasn't great in the playoffs. You know, it sounds and certainly seems. I know he won't admit that he was injured, but it certainly sounds like he was playing through something and then that affected him in the playoffs. Otherwise, that doesn't really add up. And even if he had a poor playoffs, again, short sample. Like, let's not overreact to this. I've been seeing like these like Oilers throwback clips to Fernando Pisani in the playoffs. Remember how great he was in the playoffs for them. Didn't mean he was like, he didn't suddenly become like a 30 goal scorer, right? So I do think that Hronek was like, you've got two like bona fide, with a bullet, top 4 defensemen on your club, and probably top pair defensemen in Hughes and Hronek. You couldn't let him walk. I think the number they got him at is, all things considered, a fair number. It wasn't the doomsday, getting paid more than Hughes, dipping into the 8 million range. You're in the low 7s. I think that's, I saw the deal and I thought, okay, fine, that seems fine. Like, it seems like that makes some sense. You're committing a lot of years to him, but he's still relatively young. I think the beard makes him look older. Like, we think he's like 30, but he's only 26. So you commit to him into a few years into his 30s, but I don't think that's such a big deal.
Great stuff, Rob. You have a fabulous week. When the Oilers lift that cup, we're going to see all sorts of content coming out of the Daily Hive and Offside, right? Because that was the other topic we were going to get to. Canucks fans and how they're reacting to this Oilers comeback in the Stanley Cup Final Series. What are you seeing out there?
Well, I think there's a bit of a split in terms of diehard Canucks fans. The most vocal Canucks fans on Twitter do not want to see the Oilers do this at all. I think the casual fans are a little bit more on board with Canada's team. I must admit, I'm conflicted. I want to see a great story, right? Like, and what a story that would be if the Oilers came all the way back. McDavid winning a cup would be something to see, but we will never hear the end of it from Oilers fans, ever. So we're talking about thinking long term. Short term would be cool to see, but man, I don't know. I don't want to be here for the Oilers fans coming at us.
Rob, the best of both worlds is that the Oilers blow a 3-goal lead in the third period of Game 7.
Easing to that point, right, and then crush them.
Well, and also it will expose the folly of having the Stanley Cup Final run so late, and then maybe Gary and the boys will move the season up a little bit and get us out of here a little closer to the start of June than the start of July. How about that? Huh?
Yeah.
Does that check every box for us?
Yeah.
Because I do want to see more hockey here, especially with the basketball done in the J so horrible. So, great stuff, Rob. Till next Thursday.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.